All right, a little bit of news this week with Trans Mountain filing with the CER, their DRA optimization project. So we get some specifics on that. We'll just run over some of the things that were disclosed in the application, as well as just do a quick overview of the pipeline and then talk about future expansions, competing projects, supply growth, just a basic overview of the announcement of this project. So the application shows it'll be 16 DRA units at 12 different pump stations along the pipeline. As they've guided to previously, it's an increase of capacity of approximately 10%. That comes out to about 90,000 barrels per day. The cost is very low, as typical with some of these DRA projects. The actual capital cost of installing these DRA units is typically pretty low. They applied and said it would be $9 million total cost of this project. So very capital efficient. We might as well go into it now. It's important to point out the DRAs, the units themselves don't cost very much, but it does increase your operating expenses on the pipeline quite a bit, as the DRAs that you're pumping in are pretty expensive. So keep that in mind. While the capital costs are low, it will significantly raise the operating cost per barrel of the pipeline to use those DRAs. Still will be a fantastic expansion, assuming they can fill that capacity, but it's not going to be. Don't just look at it as a $9 million project. You have to add in the operating costs that go into that as well. The timeline is just a few months of work, and it'll be complete by January 2027 is what they're looking at. So let's switch over to the portal. We'll just do a quick overview of the pipeline. So this is Trans Mountain. I've highlighted this one before, just as a refresher though. Take a look at the flows on the pipe. Capacity after the twinning of the pipeline runs right around 890,000 barrels per day. It hasn't run full. It's been pretty close in August and September, pretty close to capacity there. And you can see the mix of heavy, light, and then it does run some refined products through it as well. So some of the other things to talk about with this project, why they probably did the timing now for such a small capital cost project. Why didn't they do it a little bit sooner? I think it's important to talk about where these barrels are probably going. So again, I showed the flows at this point. If we go a little bit further down the pipeline, just a review, the pipeline splits off and sends some of its oil into the U.S., where it delivers into some of the Washington refineries. So we can just take a quick look at what those look like. Runs relatively full for this at about 230,000 barrels per day. And then the rest of the flows, so call them 600,000 barrels a day, a little less than that, flow toward Westridge and Burnaby. So there's a delivery point in Burnaby, which is for a refinery. So it does the pipeline does dump some oil there and deliver some oil there, but the majority of the oil goes to Westridge export facility. So this flow point signifies what's flowing out of Westport, or into Westport, I should say. So as you can see, and one of the interesting things about Trans Mountain, the fact that it hasn't run full, the major reason for that is there's just not enough supply in Canada for it to run full yet. Now, with some of the guided production growth that we see and that's been guided to by the Canadian producers for next year, we do see that this would probably catch some more barrels. We'll talk about that shortly. But as you can see, this is flowed only out of Westridge or into Westridge. Flowed only at a max a little bit over 500,000 barrels per day, which led many to ask the question of, given the draft restraints out of here, given some of the limitations of this port, is it actually able to ship all the barrels? Is Trans Mountain actually able to ship 890,000 barrels per day? Because you're constrained going into the U.S., you're constrained at what the Burnaby can take for the refinery, and then there's some constraints here. So I never really got a great answer on if it could actually ship maybe, let's say, 100,000 more out of this facility to actually fill the pipeline of Trans Mountain. But that's why the timing of this expansion maybe makes some sense. So this expansion's coming online again, 90,000 extra barrels per day. Again, the pipeline's not running full right now, so but 90,000 extra barrels a day at a time where they are dredging this port and making it possible to load a full Aframax from this facility. So from what Trans Mountain has said previously, they're only able to load Aframaxes at 70% capacity due to draft constraints. So the dredging that they're doing here at this port will take care of that to where they can fully load the Aframax. So getting an extra 200 to 250,000 barrels per day, it sounds like, on an Aframax once that dredging is done. So that dredging is going to be complete at the end of 2026. That's when this project comes online. So you're setting yourself up in what appears to be a situation where this pipeline's able to easily run the 890 that it was running before, and then with the DRAs, it's able to go up to 980 or approximately 980 with that 10% increase with this DRA project. Now, as we've talked about a couple times, and a few weeks ago we put this in our Plainview Weekly, and I'll just reference back to it. Do we need that capacity out of Canada? I think you probably do, and they probably will fill some of that expansion capacity. I don't know if it'll go completely full, but given the guidance from Canadian producers, as I'm showing here, and as we highlighted, and I'll link to this newsletter in the the text portion of this posting, we have about 3% growth exit to exit 25 to 26 for Canadian production next year. So that's a little over 100,000 barrels per day. That most of the and do we have any open space on the pipelines? If we scroll down here, this is kind of our forecast of what you're looking at. So pipeline capacity is this orange line, and then blue is historical pipeline flows, and green is kind of our forecasted pipeline flows, assuming we get the kind of growth that the Canadian producers have guided for up here. So as I mentioned before, in the winter, the pipelines flow a little bit fuller because of extra condensate blending that happens. So we kind of said in this posting that by the time you hit January, it's not on this graph, but by the time you hit January 2027, you're going to be at or above pipeline capacity. So that project, based on our forecast, would be needed then to carry those additional Canadian barrels out of Canada. Now, you do have Mainline Optimization 1 project by Enbridge that comes online sometime in 2027. I don't think they've guided to an exact month there, but that would further help expand capacity. Again, I don't know if that's late in 27 or early in 27. I don't think that they've guided to that. So that's kind of what you're looking at there. I think the project makes a ton of sense. Low cost. You don't pay the high operating expenses probably unless you need to use those DRAs to pump the extra 90,000 barrels a day through. And I think their uncommitted rate's about $10 per barrel. You're easily making some good margin on a project like that if you're able to pump barrels through, even using all those DRAs. Looking to the future, which is interesting, I think I don't have any disagreements with how people have talked about the economics of this pipeline. I think a lot of people, shippers obviously, were disappointed in the cost overruns and the fact that the tariff rates increased. That said, at $9 for a committed shipper and the premium you're getting at the West Coast, it's very competitive and possibly better than some of the options down to the Gulf Coast on competing pipelines out of Canada. So looking ahead for future projects, and if you have a chance, their website lays them out pretty well now. If you have a chance to go look at those, they do a good job of laying those out. They have talked about a project that would expand like this Sumas piece here. So it would expand the leg going into Washington, I think it's by 60,000 barrels per day. So they could push some more barrels through there. That doesn't increase the capacity of the pipeline. But they've also talked about doing a full-scale pump station expansion. So this would be separate from the DRA expansion we're talking about, which would be an expansion of 11 new pump stations on the pipeline, 9 expanded pumps, and then 30 kilometers of new pipeline. Now, this is this is obviously a more capitally intensive project than the one we've talked about with the DRAs. But given the economics of this pipeline, I mean, it's not going to be cheap, but it's not going to be crazy expensive like laying hundreds of kilometers of pipe through the ground. So it's probably a project that is pretty economical, and I would say probably in sometime in the next couple of years gets done. So Enbridge Mainline Optimization Project 1 already FID'd. Our Mainline Optimization Project 2 for I think they said 2028 is what they're looking at. That probably I would say that's likely to get done as well. This would be another project that I think would get done. After those projects, though, I think a lot of the lower hanging fruit is gone, and we're gonna have to. Canada's gonna have to think hard about what the next project is. I would say I'm generally bearish a new pipeline going to the West Coast for the reasons many others have listed. So I won't belabor those, but the same reasons. I mean, no one's gonna underwrite a project unless they have some sort of government support or guarantee. Given what happened with Trans Mountain, given the cost overruns of the twinning project that they did. So I think that's a good overview. Again, I think it's a good project. I would say depending on the timing of Enbridge's project, if Enbridge project comes online later in 27, I think that there's a chance you could see this pipeline get pretty full with some of the production growth that we see out of Canada in 2026. So hopefully that's a good overview for you guys. I'll try to get back on track of doing the Plainview Weekly and then the video posts every week. I know I've slacked a little bit, but hope everybody has a great weekend, and thanks for listening.